We're in the last week of our Times Convert Book Club read along. Thank you so much for those of you who've been with us since the beginning. I can't wait to hear what you've gathered and drawn out of this experience of reading, and also of having my perspective on what I was trying to do in this book and what issues I was trying to bring to the fore. We're at the last part. You're going to be reading chapters, oh my goodness, 28 to 38, which will bring us to the end. On April the 19th, we're going to have an Instagram live where I will have a few closing thoughts, but also be there to answer your questions. You all guys always say you wish you could be in my classroom. This is, you basically have been for 3 weeks, and your midterm exam or our discussion section is at the end on April the 19th, a historically important day for those of you who want to Google it, but it is the battles of Lexington and Concord that shot heard round the world, that began the American Revolution. But this week, what we're doing is we're finishing up with our intertwined stories, I guess I should say, of origins. Phoebe's origins as a vampire, Marcus's origins as a revolutionary, and then a vampire. And of course, the ongoing origin story of this extraordinary new family that Matthew and Diana are building. In terms of the history, we're actually going to be in early 19th century, the growing pains and birth pains of America. We are going to be in the Mid-Atlantic states and also in New Orleans, where Marcus continues to make a lot of those mistakes we talked about last week, because that's how we learn. Even though we try to prevent it these days and put up rubber bumpers around everybody, guess what? You're not going to learn if you don't make mistakes. Well, don't worry. Marcus is making tons of them in these chapters, and learning to face the consequences and be responsible with them. There's some amazing exchanges between Marcus and Matthew in these chapters where Marcus basically says, I've resented what you did to bring some semblance of order to the situations I'd made, for hundreds of years, but I can now appreciate why you make them. What we always want in a book is to see our characters go on an emotional journey and for them to grow. And we really get the payoff in these chapters for all of the characters that we've touched on by seeing, how the world is working in the early 19th century when we think about our age of revolution, and also seeing how Marcus is able to take responsibility for his actions, to stop blaming his father. In the case of Phoebe, it's a lot about learning the emotional changes that are going to come out. We've been so focused on her physical changes as a vampire. But these chapters are really a coming of age with Phoebe with respect to life and death. She faces a tragic situation, some very difficult choices, and realizes how very difficult it is to be immortal at a time and in a world in which most people are not. When I was rereading Times Convert before doing these videos, these parts really resonated with me as a cancer survivor. And there was one particular place where I'm going to actually read it. It happens at the very end of chapter 34, and it's Marcus and Phoebe going to Sept-Tours and to see Isabeau. We traveled down to Sept-Tours that night, hoping that the darkness would make the journey more bearable for Phoebe. This is Diana who's telling us this. She and Marcus sat together in the back seat, her head on his shoulder, their hands knotted together. Francoise sat next to them like a Victorian chaperone, though she spent most of her time looking out the window rather than at her charges. Isabeau was waiting for us, as we knew she would be. She had heard the cars approach, the sound of the engine and the crunch of tires on gravel, the only early warning system she needed. She helped Phoebe out of the car. You must be tired, Isabeau said, kissing her on both cheeks. We will sit quietly together and listen to the birds as they wake. I always find that very restful in times like these. Francoise will draw you a bath first. Marcus came around the car with a small case of Phoebe's clothes. I'll get you settled. No. Isabel looked at her grandson with a forbidding expression. Phoebe is here to see me, not you. But Marcus looked at Phoebe wide-eyed. You thought you would stay here? Isabeau snorted. She does not need a man fussing over her. Go back to Les Revenants and stay there. Come, Francois said, drawing Phoebe gently towards the stairs. You heard, Madame Isabeau. Phoebe looked conflicted between her desire to be with Marcus and her respect for the de Clermont matriarch. It won't be much longer now, she whispered to Marcus before letting Francoise lead her away. I'm not far, Marcus said. Phoebe nodded. That wasn't fair, Grand-mère, Marcus said. It's too soon for Phoebe to have to make a choice like that. Too soon? There's no such thing, Isabeau said. We are all of us asked to grow up too quickly. It is the way the gods remind us that life, no matter how long, is still but a breath. And those pages really, really hit me hard. And I do think that so many of us have this ideal sense of what a childhood should be, what growing up should be. You should be safe, you should be protected, you shouldn't be allowed to make tragic mistakes, all of which of course is absolutely true. And yet at the same time, we are all asked to grow up too quickly. And that is what makes us stronger. And it is also true that life is but a breath, no matter if you're a vampire or a warm blood. You know, you never have quite the length of time that you hope that you have. And it's a wonderful kind of meditation, I think, on mortality and immortality in these last chapters. As Diana, who is not immortal, and Matthew, who is a vampire, and their children, who are Brightborn and therefore will live a long time, but will one day die. And Isabeau, who's lived for a long time, has definite ideas about the place of men when it comes to taking care of the women in the family. All of these things are swirling around, and they're just kind of pulled through from the books that preceded it, but also from these bigger themes. America was, when the white colonists came, America became a patriarchy, where the men were the ones to take care of everything and they were in charge. And what Isabeau is firmly but absolutely showing him and Matthew, what all the women in the vampire culture are showing them, is you guys can go off and do you. Be the powerful patriarchs. Think you're in charge of everything. But actually, there are places and spaces you're not welcome. Places that are for the women in this family, places where we heal and we support each other. I love Francoise in these chapters. She saved Diana from so many disastrous mistakes in Shadow of Night. And here she is as a chaperone to Phoebe, helping her along on her journey to greater empowerment. And so it's a really wonderful way, I think, to sort of draw all of these themes of power and life and death and the consequences of rebellion and insisting on doing things your own way. And also just kind of a lovely way of setting us up for Blackbird Oracle. So I'm really interested to hear in our Instagram Live how the story read differently to those of you who might have wondered what was the point of Times Convert before. Because I saw a lot of people felt that way, like, I don't understand this. I just wish we could get on with Diana and Matthew. Well, maybe do you feel differently now about why we needed this and the importance of it, now that we're seeing Pip and Becca grow up before our eyes? Are we feeling a little different about it now that we know about memory bottles and the ghosts of Ravenswood? And it'll be really intriguing for you to just think about, that in a bigger picture, because it's hard as a reader, right? These books come out, they come out in a way, and you kind of want all your questions answered and satisfied. And sometimes it seems like I'm taking you on some wacky detour. But I like to think that the detour has a real purpose, not just to keep you from, falling in a pothole, but something more significant. And that as we move forward with our stories about the de Clermonts and the bishops and the proctors, we are going to need to take some of these historical detours, which I think are really going to enrich and also deepen our connection to what is going on in this much bigger arc of story, which we're kind of only approaching the midpoint now. So I'm really looking forward to our Instagram Live on April the 19th. It won't exactly be the shot heard round the world. It will be the chat heard round the interwebs, but nevertheless, I'm hoping that as many of you can join us as possible. And of course, if you can't make it during the live, it will be recorded and available for you to play back later. And I will do my best to go through later posted comments on those posts and answer whatever questions that I can. So without further ado, you're off to your last chapters, the conclusion of Times Convert. Check back in with us next week, and where we'll have Professor Harkness's discussion section. Hope you're enjoying this. I'm really enjoying watching and listening in to the comments and the discussion, and I can't wait to join up with you for our final meeting at the end of next week, or this week, sorry. See you soon.